That is so old, but I still love it. So I was inspired to get into teaching based on those teachers that went before me. I wasn't the average Joe kid. I always felt like I was the last one to understand what we were learning, and those teachers really made a difference. And that's why I went into teaching, because I wanted to be that teacher for all those students that aren't maybe the smartest kids in the class, but still need to get it. And so I remember my first year of teaching, and I was so nervous, not only for the fact that you are now the teacher, you're not just a student in the class, but also I remember being nervous because I was super young. I wasn't much older than some of the kids I'd be teaching. I mean, some of my kids were 18 years old and I was 22, right? So I felt like, wow, am I ready to do this? And I think I probably worked myself up a little bit too much in that respect. But yeah, I graduated straight out of uni, got straight into a teacher placement. I can now say from experience that no matter how long you've been teaching, we're all constantly learning. And some of the best teachers are those that continually learn and those that stay humble about it as well. So those that are new to my channel, my name is Alex and I am a high school teacher, a secondary school teacher, whatever you want to call it. I think there's like a lot of negative stigma sometimes to younger teachers. I mean, I've heard older teachers say that teachers shouldn't be teachers until they've gone into industry and sampled a few things out there and then come into teaching later in life. That is not true. Like, some of the best teachers that I've observed and some of the best teachers that I've worked with, I mean, I'm impartial, but some of the best teachers are the young ones, the ones that come straight out of uni with fresh, creative, new ideas. And in a sense, some of the older ones maybe have felt a little bit intimidated and say comments like that. So do be true to yourself and have confidence that, you know, if you pass those skills tests and if you passed your degree, that you have what it takes. So one of the reasons I started this channel was to reach out to teachers and really connect with people that want to get into teaching as well. So just be reassured that if you've got that degree and if you've passed the test, that you are good enough. Do not try to work yourself up. Take a breath. Exhale and know that you got this. Most likely you're going to know more than the kids know, right? So that already puts you in a more confident position. Obviously be humble with it, but this is your show. You are the teacher, they are the students. So let's get into my tips. So the first tip is to be yourself. Don't try to go into teaching thinking, oh, you know, I need to be the typical teacher that you probably remember from your education, right? Try not to fake it, because students will just see right through that. They'll see that, oh, this person is really trying to put on a show, and you're probably going to lose them if you do that. I myself in my classroom, I just try to make it a more comfortable environment where they feel that they can be themselves as well. I mean, you don't want to be going in your classroom saying, hello students, it's time to sit down and do our work. Like, you're going to lose them. You need to have a little bit of character so that you can kind of get that love of learning and comfortable environment happening. Okay, so my second tip is to make sure you have really good behavior management and stick to the rules that you set. Students need to know their boundaries and they actually want you to be their teacher rather than their friend. Set out clear boundaries and rules at the beginning of your class. You may need to make sure that you've read the behaviour policies so that there is consistency across the school. I mean, you don't want to be saying, okay, you can chew gum, and then another teacher is saying, no, they can't, because that's just going to confuse them. Now, if you're going into teaching as a young teacher, the students will try you and see how you react. And I don't mean they're going to try you in a nasty way. More so, they're going to test your limits to see, well, let's see if she actually pulls through with what she's said. So for example, if you said, okay, you get 2 warnings and then a detention, and then it comes to it and you've done
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
9, 10 warnings, then they know that actually you're not following through with what you said, and therefore we can probably get away with a little bit more also. So make sure that if you've said 2 warnings and detention, it is 2 warnings and a detention. Don't get me wrong, it's okay to be friendly with your students, and I do encourage that, but I think you can't be too nice, because it will backfire eventually when it comes to you being friends with that student and then having to set them a detention. It's just not going to work. Okay, so my third tip is that you should plan ahead and get organised. The more you can do ahead of time, the easier it's going to be when you come to start the term. So I am going to do another video on what exactly I do in the workup before the academic year starts, just to make life a little bit easier for myself. I mean, who doesn't want an easy life, right? So there are so many things that you already have to get your head around. So anything that you can plan ahead is always going to help you. I mean, you need to learn your main contacts. Who is the safeguarding lead? Who is your head of department? Who is the reprographics technician when you need to get some printing done? Then what is the behaviour policy? Do you have a lunchtime duty? Do you have to do an after school club? So try as much as you can to plan ahead. Now, this information should be readily available for you before you actually start your post. You should now know how long your lessons are going to be. You should know what curriculum you are following, and potentially you've even got a unit of work to follow as well. So could you be planning your lessons now on the workup? I would say that I would plan a month to even 6 weeks to take you through to the next break. So then you at least know that you don't need to think about lesson planning. You can focus on the other things. How are you going to assess your students? Can you be making a tracker that's ready to be populated when it comes to entering the grades, right?
How will they hand in assignments? Do you need a teacher planner? Yes. And how are you going to use that teacher planner? What resources do you need?
All of these things are things that you need to think about ahead of time so that you don't feel like, when it comes to school term. Okay, so my fourth tip is to be consistent. If I could say that one thing that I have taken away, it would be that. Be consistent with yourself and also be consistent with your students as well. I remember when I first started, I would have a student say, well, Mr. So-and-so let me chew gum during class. As long as I got on with my work, it was fine. And I'd be like, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should let them chew gum. I don't know. Yeah, I'll just let them. And then you just find that the rule that you set has now been violated by yourself. Have your routine. For example, when I start my class, I stand at the door and I greet my students. On the board is a starter task that they should be getting on with as soon as they enter the room. They put their bags down, get their pencil cases out and whatever else they might need, and then they get on with it. I'm still greeting people at the door at this point. By the time I come into the lesson, do the register, and then ready to start the class, they should be pretty much wrapping up on the starter task that I gave them. They're used to this routine. As soon as they come in, they know what to expect. Nobody has to ask me anything at that point. So it's really, really important that you have a routine in place because students do like consistency too. And if a student is sat there and they're not engaged, I'm just like, what you doing? So the fifth tip that I have is to know your class and obviously know your tutor group as well if you have one. It's really, really important that they feel safe in this environment and that you actually acknowledge their presence there. It's really important to know them so that you can actually alter your lesson to fit them. If they're into, I don't know, football and the sports, could you potentially put that in one of your lessons? Or maybe something's happened in the news that you know that they're interested in because you can hear it from their conversations. Could you put that in? That is what ultimately creates really great lessons and keeps them focused. I myself like to picture myself in that lesson. I mean, if I've got a 2-hour lesson, I do not want to be sat in my seat for the entire 2 hours. Now, I'm a little bit different in that I've got more of a vocational practical subject, but I do feel like this principle can be applied for a range of subjects. I'd like to get them up, I like to get creative, get them doing group work, pair work, lots of different activities. And by the time it comes to them having to leave, they're like, wow, where did that lesson even go, right? And that's brilliant for me. That's like a success for me. So find out what excites them, then put it in your planning. And then my sixth tip is to always reflect on what you're doing. In your first year of training, there's so much research happening, there's so much reflection, there's observations happening, and you're soaking it all in, and you're encouraged to kind of evaluate, well, what is happening here? What would you change? Rada. It's really important not to lose sight of that. Always reflect on what you're doing. Did it actually meet the learning objectives? Did it actually do what you planned for it to do? I mean, I've had times where I've planned like the most amazing lessons. I spent so much time on planning this lesson, thinking it's going to be amazing, the kids are going to love it. And that is the lesson where the kids are just like, and I'm like, what went wrong? What went wrong? That lesson was amazing, but the delivery of it was just not great. It wasn't received well. At that point, I would have to then reflect and say, well, what went wrong? What would I change? Did they actually meet the learning objectives? Was it relevant? And those kind of questions have to be asked in order to move forward, and then obviously developing your planning. I think research is also really, really important. I mean, when you are training, you have so much opportunity to go and observe, but when you actually become a teacher, It pretty much doesn't happen unless you request it, unless you go to a teacher and say, actually, can I come into your lesson and just observe what you're doing? And mostly 9 times out of 10, the teachers will be like, yeah, fine. And they'll be flattered by it. So to just go and observe that student in another subject and what they kind of respond to, I think is great practice for all teachers to just kind of connect and say, okay, this works for this one, this doesn't work. And then obviously that helps the student to progress further. There's so many communities, even online, on Facebook, where you can talk to different teachers and see what best practice is for them. Don't forget, students are learning, but teachers are also. And the last tip, which I think is number 7, is to just take care of yourself. I think sometimes teaching can get overwhelming. There's so many plates that are spinning. You're trying to juggle it all and you can burn out if you don't manage your time well. So it's really, really important that you invest in yourself. Take a break. Try to maintain that work-life balance. Put your feet up. Have a cup of tea. Do whatever it is that pretty much puts you in a happy place, because teaching can be a lot. But with prior planning and strategies in place, it can be manageable. Lean on those that are around you. Lean on those that can support you in your department and just in your personal life as well. It's really, really important that you have that positive energy, because ultimately that then gets transferred into your classroom, and a lot of the times students can pick up on it as well. So just take a break, take a breather, you'll be fine. I think sometimes in your first year you think, okay, I've got this deadline, I have to meet this deadline. But at some point you have to just say, you know what, it's going to get done when it gets done. I'm not going to burn myself out. My health and my well-being is more important. And you know what, despite what many people think about high school kids, for the majority of the time they are so lovely. They've got so much personality and they long so much to be accepted by their teachers and by their friends, and they're just trying to fit in, and really your heart goes out to them. And I just love my students. I just think they're just so full of character, and I love that I've created an environment that they feel comfortable in, because ultimately that's what they need. Be yourself and they will love you for it, and it'll encourage them to be themselves as well, whatever wacky characters they have. You'll be surprised how many of them actually look at you as the teacher, as their role model. No pressure there. Okay guys, so those are my top tips that I think every first year teacher needs to know. Make sure you take care of yourself. Make sure that your health, your well-being, your family is your priority. End of the day, that energy is going to be transferred into your classroom. All right, guys, until the next one, love ya.